Hey, everybody, it's Devin.
And Kate? Yeah, that's it.
Wow.
I know.
Welcome to Med Crimes.
It's gotten to that point, guys.
Did you forget your name?
Maybe a little?
Are you having an identity crisis?
Let's not talk about it. We're just going to move right on.
I know who you are because I see you all the time now.
I know. You guys, can I just... So it's like the American dream. Like, you get married, you have kids, you buy a house, and you also work with your bestie. If any of you out there are not working with your best friend, I highly recommend it. It's fun.
It's been a snowy day here.
It has. Happy March.
We got a foot of snow.
In my opinion, January and February are the longest months of the year, so I'm actually kind of excited to be in March.
True. However, I don't like that, like, last week, my sons were playing on a trampoline barefoot.
Oh, yeah.
Which, that was a little much, the barefoot. But outside with the neighbors, and now we got a foot of snow.
Yes.
So there's that.
Yeah, there was a lot of shoveling this morning. It was gross.
I do love a good snowstorm, especially when you don't have to leave the house.
Yep.
We got to paint the snow today with my kids. I had this snow watercolor stuff. It's basically food coloring, watercoloring, whatever.
What a cool idea, though.
Sprayed it on the snow.
I love
made
that.
some patterns.
Aww.
My front yard looks like vomited rainbow.
Like the Skittles peed all over your lawn.
Pretty much.
Kind of punchy today.
Pretty much.
Oh, it's been a long day.
It's been a long day. I hope you guys are ready for MK Ultra Part. Duh.
I will give you a synopsis.
So is this going to be the final part?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Because you originally thought maybe it'd be longer.
I know. I was able to kind of round it off in a way that I think I'm covering just enough to give you guys sort of, the gist and a good overview.
I always loved the gist.
The gist is a good thing. And if I start branching off into all of these little sub projects, it gets very convoluted, and on a podcast might be kind of difficult to follow. I'm just not that good of a podcast host to be able to break it down like that.
I disagree.
Oh, thank you.
First of all,
thank you.
I've been known to be your co-host.
No, we're both co-hosts.
I've been in some reviews. The other host.
Oh,
is
yeah.
I think what I
I've
meant.
seen that too, which
your
is
premiere.
Not the case. But anyway. I'll give you a little bit of a where we left off. So MK Ultra, just as a reminder, was a government operation designed to find methods of mind control, which employed tactics like torture, chemical, and drug use. While some participants were willing, there were thousands that were unwilling subjects. So the vast majority were completely unwilling to participate in any of this. And many probably died during these experiments, but there's a lot of records that we don't have, and we will get into that.
The ones that you have been presenting so far that are the most striking for me are the children.
It was so hard. Yeah.
Doing my one re-listen that I do per episode.
Yes, same.
You got to the part, and I at least felt this time thank God I don't have to listen to this part, because I had to hear it the first time.
I know. That was really tough. There's trigger warnings in this episode. Again, we're going to be talking about warfare and military stuff. I'm not going to be discussing things like child abuse and stuff here.
We get a little bit of a break.
We do today.
Mm-hmm.
So as we left off, MK Ultra is in full swing. And there are now experiments being undertaken at every large hospital, every large teaching institution in the United States.
Which is really baffling.
It is so widespread.
This was not secretive at all.
No, I mean what they were actually doing was pretty secretive, but people knew what was going on.
How widespread they were conducting these said secrets.
Exactly, and then a lot of the times it came out later on that the administrators at these facilities knew exactly what was going on right under their noses. They knew about these experiments. So it's not like they had full deniability. And they knew full well and also were probably getting paid to keep things under wraps and to keep things quiet. We are going to start by touching on the story of Frank Olson. So Frank Olson was an Army chemist whom had never taken LSD before in his life. His supervisor at the CIA covertly dosed him with LSD sort of as an experiment, as many other agents, if they just showed up at the office, would end up getting dosed, like we talked about. After this, Frank plunged to his death from a 13th story New York City hotel room. Yes. This was several days after he had taken the LSD, but it's known to cause unknowingly, and it's known to cause mood dysphoria, which can last for weeks afterwards.
My goodness.
So it was thought to be as a result of the effect from the drug. So this was a huge deal because Olson was a really, really well-known and well-trusted individual.
So a brief branch off. Yeah. But this could even be things in future episodes because there has been a pretty significant case coming from postpartum psychosis.
Yes.
Right? And so this is a delirium drug-induced psychotic break.
Yep. And so that's
fortunately only harmed himself.
Right.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
But
so there's other theories, which I'm going to get into, because there's actually a lot of mystery and sketchiness surrounding his death, because this was a big deal, like I had said, because he was really well known. But apparently days before he was dosed with LSD, Olson had gone to his supervisors to discuss that he wasn't sure that what was being done within MK Ultra was the right thing to do. He was questioning the morality of the whole
Finally,
thing. Someone's like,
hello?
You guys,
are we sure this is the right thing to do?
Are we sure this is our only option? Are we sure there's no better way to go about any of this? So he had literally just gone to his superiors and not only was questioning the morality of everything, but he actually asked to resign from it completely. But he knew a lot because he was very well involved in this. And then days later, he gets dosed and something really bad happens to him. We're going to talk about it a little bit more in depth a little bit later on in the episode, but there's a lot of mystery surrounding that. So we had discussed that LSD was initially very, very popular, and it was consuming much of the projects and objectives within MK Ultra. But most recently, the popularity is starting to fade a little bit, largely, again, because the reactions and the results from person to person are so inconsistent. They weren't getting great data. How everybody reacts, is all, there's no great.
Hello, this is why you don't immediately start trials on human beings.
Well, that's exactly.
Because, we're all different.
Thank God
we react to things differently.
Yeah.
We absorb things differently.
Exactly. They could not find that dose or that circumstance in which they could really count on that certain result from the LSD. It was just too.
This one thing is going to get us whatever we want.
They could never just find that.
Imagine that.
Because it's LSD.
There's too many variables with humans.
Too many variables, exactly. So we'll talk a little bit about the other drugs that they tended to branch out to. So one method that they started really getting into, and this started to really gain some popularity around this time, was the intravenous administration of an amphetamine into one arm and a barbiturate into the other. And for those of you that are familiar with both of the class of medications, you're like, what? It's almost like one drug should really cancel the other one out, but also not really. I mean, they both just create so many really unpleasant side effects.
That's why there's drug-to-drug interactions.
Exactly. So the barbiturate it's a depressant drug that they're typically used for anxiolytics, anticonvulsants, or hypnotics. So as you can imagine, this really kind of depresses the central nervous system. It can make you sleepy. It can essentially they would administer it, and once the individual begins to fall asleep, then the amphetamine would be given. And the amphetamines are these strong central nervous system stimulants, which are nowadays commonly used as recreational drugs. But then that would directly counteract the effects of the barbiturate and create these competing side effects and symptoms that were just super unpleasant. So that was a nice nifty little thing that they like to fuck around with people with. I found this list of hundreds of drugs that they used in all of these trials. I'm just going to list a few of them here that are more commonly known. So heroin was used to experiment with. Morphine, temazepam, which is a benzodiazepine.
Heavy hitters.
Used to treat anxiety or induce sleep. Mescaline, which I was not really familiar with. Apparently it's a drug similar to LSD in that it produces a euphoric or hallucinogenic effect. So this one, hopefully I pronounce it correctly, psilocybin, which is, or psilocybin. So this is a naturally occurring chemical within mushrooms, and it's actually that psychedelic. It causes that psychedelic and like hallucinogenic effect.
This is the drug when they say they're doing shrooms.
That's exactly what that is. Yeah. So alcohol, they used a lot of alcohol, would give it intravenously, just like pure, ethanol.
And alcohol mixed with any of those drugs.
Oh, would just be completely disastrous. And we know that now.
Yeesh.
They used scopolamine commonly, which is an anticholinergic. It's commonly used to treat nausea, excess secretions, and motion sickness. But in excess can greatly affect our hemodynamics, like our blood pressure and heart rate. And then sodium pentothal, which I remember hearing this name sodium pentothal, and it was like, for a while in the movies would be like associated. It's like the commonly known truth serum. It's got a rapid onset. It's very short acting. It's a barbiturate, which actually back in the day before propofol, it was used as a general anesthetic. Okay. And then we kind of got away from it when we found propofol.
It's always when you find a better drug, right?
Exactly. But if you use it in really small doses, not to knock someone out, it creates like this intoxication and disinhibition, similar to like an acute alcohol intoxication. But it doesn't reliably like force someone to uncover the truth, but it might help people like, accidentally slip. There was a lot that went down in Montreal regarding MK Ultra. So we spoke a little bit about this guy, Dr. Donald Cameron.
I'm really surprised, by the way, about the international effect, given that it was our government.
Oh, yeah. I mean, our reach is just global.
I mean, of course. Yeah. But sometimes Canadians tend to be smarter than us. And a lot of times, especially in the last few years, a lot of people have been going to Canada.
Canadians might be smarter than us, but everybody has a price.
You people seem happier if you're anyone from Canada.
Hello, you have Saskatchewan and Big Feet live there.
Hello. And universal health care.
I think the Bigfoot thing is definitely for me.
I mean,
it's Bigfoot for me.
I'm struggling with my insurance lately, so universal health care.
Devin's about to pick up and move to Canada, so you guys can accept her. We spoke a little bit about this guy, Dr. Donald Cameron, who conducted these awful experiments at McGill University in Canada. And he actually was an American psychiatrist. He was not Canadian. And he commuted from Montreal to Albany, New York. Or I'm sorry, he was based out of Albany, and he commuted to Montreal once a week to conduct these experiments and work at McGill.
Drive.
It is a little bit of a drive.
A little bit.
He was paid a shitload of money to do this.
That'll do it.
Reportedly receiving $69,000 between 1957 and 1964 from the CIA, which today would be the equivalent of roughly $580,000.
Okay.
To carry out MK Ultra experiments there. And we discussed that he fathered that method called depatterning, which he would like starve people, put them to sleep for 60 days, and then
that's where they're trying to wipe out their brain.
Exactly, and he succeeded in doing so in a lot of cases.
That's because you just essentially broke their soul.
Well, basically, you break them as a human, like you're taking away their identity as a person. So he also did some other terrible stuff. Surprise, surprise. Dr. Cameron claimed that he did not know that he was receiving money directly from the CIA for this. He thought, or he states that he thought, that he was being given a research grant by McGill University.
Baloney.
Lots of it. In addition to using sleep deprivation and induced comas, he experimented with various other paralytic drugs, as well as used ECT or electroconvulsive therapy up to 30 to 40 times the normal power.
Oh!
Yeah. So
I was just about to comment how dangerous ECT is anyway.
Yeah, it's definitely
risky. And then
risky.
You just said that.
Yeah. So I can't imagine that some people did not die just from being electrocuted.
I mean...
Yeah. I mean, ECT is actually very effective, and we still do it routinely. But it's dangerous. But it is very dangerous. Yeah. So
it's usually when you're trying to treat something like... Not
like
the
severe
first thing you go to.
Oh no, it's like for
the
resistant.
End stop for a lot of things.
It's for like treatment resistant depression and bipolar disorder and all of that. Again, these experiments are, typically being carried out on patients who sought his help for things like anxiety disorders, postpartum depression, other mental illnesses. Like the result of his treatments would result in things like urinary incontinence, amnesia, muscle loss, forgetting how to walk or talk entirely. forgetting their parents.
It's wiping them out.
It's wiping them out completely. And it's also making them think that the interrogators are their parents and their friends,
gosh.
and like just completely turning things around. So what their objective was, I think he is like achieving it in some twisted way, because he's sort of planting these ideas in their head. And at the time, for the success that his research brought to the CIA, he was praised, and he was actually appointed as a worldwide first chairman of the World Psychiatric Association, as well as the president of the American Psychiatric Association and the Canadian Psychiatric Association.
Wow.
So they're like, yeah, man, I mean, you're doing great. You're doing fucking awesome.
Wow.
I mean, it's wild. Now,
something, all right.
It's a whole bunch of something. So, in the early 1950s, the CIA begins constructing secret detention camps around the world, all of which are under American control. Primarily, these are throughout Europe, East Asia, mostly in Japan, Germany, and the Philippines. And the CIA captured people suspected of being enemy agents or spies, and other people they deemed expendable, to undertake various types of torture and human experimentation. And there are reports that prisoners were interrogated while being administered psychologically active drugs, electroshock therapy, and subjected to extreme temperatures and sensory isolation.
Wow.
I mean, to me, that could be, I can't imagine how many people must have died.
I was reading a book earlier today, and he was, they're talking about like training for the military and just what they go through as far as like, and when they let you know, oh, your exercise is over, but then like, nope, psych. And now you have to go through some mental training, essentially, to make you not break.
Yes.
And when I can only imagine how much more this is doing, because their intention is to break them, and they do.
Right, exactly.
And these aren't on to military personnel, these are civilians.
Yeah, exactly. Like civilians and psychiatric patients and drug addicts and homeless people and people, you know what I mean? And people that were already at such a disadvantage in life. So sad. Now, 1973 rolls around. MK Ultra, among other programs, were suddenly halted due to the panic about the Watergate scandal. So,
Watergate.
I know. In 1974, so this is the following year, the New York Times did this huge piece and released this explosive article that alleged that the CIA had conducted illegal domestic activities, and detailing that this included experiments on U.S. citizens who were unwilling to participate during the 1960s. And this was the first time that people were given a glimpse into what MK Ultra was actually doing, although no one really knew yet the scale that this was being done on still.
Right. They didn't know how global it was.
Exactly. This report kind of changed everything. So it prompted investigations by the United States Congress, and what is now known as the Church Committee, and by another commission known as the Rockefeller Commission. All of these were independent entities that were able to, they were literally assigned to look into all of the domestic and international activities from the CIA during this time. So in the summer of 1975, the Congressional Church Committee, and the Church Committee was actually named after the appointed chairperson, whose name was Frank Church, just so you know.
Okay.
Along with the Rockefeller Commission, issued a report to the public for the first time after they had done their investigation that the CIA and the Department of Defense had conducted experiments on both willing and unwitting human subjects as part of an extensive program to find out how to influence and control human behavior through the use of psychoactive drugs and other chemicals and other psychological means. And they also revealed that at least one person was known to have died during this, and that was Frank Olson. He had died after he was given LSD.
Right.
And obviously we can infer there have probably been way more deaths than we even can imagine.
Oh, absolutely.
With everything that was reported. So the report concluded that prior consent was obviously not obtained by any of these subjects for anything that was going on. And the committee noted that the experiment sponsored by these researchers called into question the decision by the agencies to not fix guidelines for the experiments. Like, why did you all just continue to do this without getting consent? And why did this happen on such a scale? Like,
right.
this is just such a massive breach of just human morality. It's wild. Now, following this in 1976, President Gerald Ford issued the first executive order on intelligence activities, which, among other things, prohibits the experimentation with drugs on human subjects except if you have their consent. So this is when like real laws around informed consent really started to kind of come from this. And the consent has to be in writing and witnessed by a disinterested party. So any human subject that is getting, experimented on for whatever reason, you absolutely have to have consent now. So subsequent orders by President Carter and Reagan after that expanded on that and created even more.
Is this what started to bring it to an end?
Yes.
Great. Good.
Yep.
Finally.
I know. Finally.
Because who's going to consent to that?
Literally no one.
First of all.
Literally no one. Now, I've been saying through all this that we have very limited records, and this was because many of the records were destroyed. So what happened was in 1973, the year before the explosive New York Times piece came out that exposed MK-Ultra, CIA Director Richard Helms ordered all MK-Ultra files destroyed in a bid, this was all amid the widespread panic from Watergate. And it wasn't just MK-Ultra, a lot of records were destroyed. Within this order, most CIA documents regarding the project were completely destroyed, which unfortunately made like a full investigation pretty much impossible because they didn't have like hard evidence,
it's all
really.
incomplete.
It's all going to be reports from people. However, they were able to find about 20,000 pages of documents that survived this because somebody had incorrectly filed them in a different building. So they were filed in a financial records building instead of whatever record building they were supposed to be filed in. And these files were then rediscovered by accident in 1977.
That's a bonus.
It is a bonus, but that's what, we have a few records, but really not anything comprehensive.
Somebody made a boo-boo.
Somebody lost their fucking job over that. I'll tell you that. So this all begins to culminate in 1977. Now they've just found these records, and in 1977, the Senate holds a hearing to look further into MK-Ultra and to kind of gather everything together, essentially do a review of everything that we had. And they had those files that they had found in the financial building. And these files, I think they were misfiled in the financial area because they dealt with the financing of the MK-Ultra projects. They were specifically like purchase orders from everything that they bought, like all of the drugs and all of the equipment. So that let us like shed some light on a few of the things that were going on. So it contained a few project details, but much more was learned from them than the Inspector General's 1963 report, which left a lot of that out. On the Senate floor, Senator Ted Kennedy was quoted to have said on this, quote, "The deputy director of the CIA and directors of over 30 universities and institutions were involved in an extensive testing and experimentation program, which included drug testing covertly on unwitting citizens at all social levels, high and low, Native Americans and forward. Several of these tests involved administration of LSD to unwitting subjects in social situations," end quote. And again, only the one death is known for sure, which is of Army chemist Frank Olson. While it was initially thought that he had died by suicide as an effect of the LSD, his family got heavily involved in this. And they were like, no, we think that he was murdered, because literally days before all of this unfolded, he had had discussions with his superiors about the morality of the project. And apparently there was some forensic evidence that later came to light around his death that
like what?
So I don't know the details, actually, but what happened when all of that came to light is that the medical examiner changed his manner of death to homicide. So, I mean, quite obviously there was
something substantial enough.
Something pretty striking enough for him to be like, there's absolutely no way this was accidental or suicide. So that was interesting. So with that, the family eventually brought a lawsuit against the CIA, and in 1975, the Olson family received a $750,000 settlement from the United States government and formal apologies from President Gerald Ford and CIA director.
Okay, so something sketchy did happen.
100% did happen. 100%.
Other than a suicide based off of
No, I think based off of that, and this is them saying, yeah, I mean, something sketchy did probably happen, and that's real sus. So here's $750,000.
Wow.
I know.
In the 70s.
I mean, in the 70s, so that's a shitload of money now. So the CIA itself subsequently acknowledged that these tests had little scientific rationale, and that a lot of what they were doing made absolutely no medical sense whatsoever, and their goals were just a huge wash.
Right.
Like, this shit that you're trying to achieve is completely impossible. My kids. Our kids.
Mine too.
They are all mine by proxy. I stand by that. Not only were these tests like not scientifically sound, a lot of the people that were quote unquote monitoring these subjects were like not qualified scientific observers. They were just like CIA agents, like Officer what's his face from fucking accounting, like, go watch this guy, he's tripping on acid. That's literally what it was. Like, they're like, a lot of it was
qualified,
just random. They had some doctors, some psychiatrists here and there, but like not for every single experiment they ran. So the stuff that happened in Montreal took a little bit longer to surface, and it became a lot more widely known in like the mid 1980s. So 1984, the CBC, which is like the Canadian Broadcasting Company, did this expose called The Fifth Estate, and that was like this huge piece on MK Ultra and what happened within Canada to participate in that. Yep. And it was learned that not only had the CIA funded Cameron's efforts, but that the Canadian government was fully aware of this. And I have and that they had evidence that they were providing like in the excess of $500,000 or $600,000 to do his experiments. Yeah. So once all of this came to light, many of Dr. Cameron's victims started to come forward, like people that he had treated and treated, quote unquote, and experimented on. And a book called The Shock Doctrine by Naomi Klein came out, and her experience and her research is, you know, in his contribution to the MK Ultra project is, you know, very widely explained in this book. And many of former patients started to bring lawsuits against the CIA for damages because of what Cameron did to them.
Good.
I know. So they brought these lawsuits. Eventually, the Canadian government actually settled out of court, and there were up to 127 known victims that ended up coming forward. So each of them were awarded around $100,000.
Wow.
I know.
Wow.
So, Dr. Cameron, if you're wondering, did die on September 8th, 1967 after suffering a massive heart attack. Unfortunately, I know. And unfortunately, his personal records, like that he kept on all of his patients, which would have been really helpful in figuring out exactly what happened.
I guess not up to date, not able to be found.
His family destroyed them. His family had them, and they destroyed everything. So details were never uncovered about what he did. Not surprising at all. So in 1994, the U.S. General Accounting Office did a study and issued a report which stated that between 1940 and 1974, the Department of Defense and other national security agencies studied thousands of human subjects and did experiments involving hazardous substances. A quote from the study reads, quote, "Working with the CIA, the Department of Defense gave hallucinogenic drugs and thousands of, quote, volunteer soldiers," end quote, in the 1950s and 60s. In addition to LSD, the Army also tested several different hallucinogenic drugs and drugs of other classes. Many of these tests were conducted under the so-called MK-Ultra program. Their goal was to counter the Soviet and Chinese advances in brainwashing techniques. Between 1953 and 1964, the program consisted of 149 sub-projects involving drug testing and other studies on unwitting human subjects.
Did you say 149 sub-projects?
Sub-projects, yeah.
Out of this one project?
Yes. Wild.
So it's spread everywhere.
Literally everywhere, yeah. So the revelations about the CIA prompted thousands of survivors to start coming forward, and then the lawsuits just started rolling in.
Everybody wanted
CIA. So, I mean, thousands of lawsuits against the federal government for conducting experiments without informed consent. While at times the government was able to get out of certain things, several plaintiffs also did receive compensation through court order, out-of-court settlements, and acts of Congress.
Everybody wonders why we're in debt.
I know, right? Jeez. During a Supreme Court hearing on one of the victims' lawsuits, Justice William Brennan argued that the need to preserve military discipline should not protect the government from liability and punishment for serious violations of the Constitution. And he was quoted to say, quote, "The medical trials at Nuremberg in 1947 deeply impressed upon the world that experimentation with unknowing human subjects is morally and legally unacceptable. The United States Military Tribunal established the Nuremberg Code as a standard against which to judge German scientists who experiment with human subjects. In defiance of this principle, military intelligence officials began surreptitiously testing chemical and biological materials, including LSD, on unwitting human subjects. No judiciously crafted rule should insulate from liability the involuntary and unknowing human experimentation alleged to have happened in this case," which I thought was really well said.
For sure.
Summarized it well. Maybe wondering what happened to Sidney Gottlieb. Remember him? Like the godfather of all of this?
All of it.
Yeah. So
Good
he's
old
the guy that brought LSD to the United States, and the godfather of MK-Ultra. So
yeah, what happened to that bastard?
He retired from the CIA in 1973 after participating in a huge number of shady operations, not just limited to MK-Ultra. Most notably, in March of 1960, he worked on plans to assassinate the Prime Minister of the Congo, in which he actually physically brought a vial of poison to the Congo to be planted on the Prime Minister's toothbrush. But the operatives that were supposed to actually carry that out ended up refusing, and there was this huge, resurgence of government, and eventually the whole thing fell apart.
Wow.
But some wild shit. He's a shady guy.
Thank God. Wow.
Yeah. Ooh. So, October 7th of 1975.
I mean, did we want that person assassinated? I'm going to assume
apparently
not.
The CIA did. I don't know.
Or he did.
He did. I don't know. October 7th of 1975. Gottlieb did testify before the church committee. However, he used an alias. And he used the name Joseph Schneider. And he didn't reveal much in his testimony, but he did state that he had destroyed nearly all personal records of what he did during his time at the agency. He was quite reclusive once things died down a bit, and he really never came forward and gave details on anything. He was later quoted to say that after his retirement, he essentially dismissed the entirety of his effort for the CIA and MK-Ultra as completely useless. Yeah, no
you got
shit.
Nowhere, dude.
Literally, all of us could have told you this, and you didn't have to hurt and kill all those people.
Nope.
Unfortunately, Gottlieb himself was never convicted of any crimes.
No.
Yeah, never.
For real?
For reals.
Wow.
How disappointing is that?
That's some bullshit.
It's a huge pile of bullshit.
That's a huge pile of horse bullshit.
Yeah, it really is. Wait, horse? Bull? Shit.
Yeah. That's exactly what I just said.
Well, I liked it, so. And on March 7th of 1999, Gottlieb died in his home in Washington, Virginia, of heart problems, apparently. So, good riddance to that guy.
Bye, dude.
A few notable people have come forward as alleged subjects of MK Ultra, which is really interesting. So, Boston mobster James Whitey Bulger, have you heard of him? Yeah, so he has come forward and been very vocal about his experiences because he had said that he was subjected to weekly injections of LSD and subsequent testing while imprisoned in Atlanta in 1957. And so, I mean, that timeline actually totally works out.
Okay, but while he was imprisoned, not beforehand. Like, he can't use that as an excuse.
No, this is like while he was in prison.
Huh.
I know.
I wonder, I was just thinking as you were saying
he wasn't trying to like get out of anything.
As a plea to
no.
It's not my fault.
No, he wasn't. He was just like, no, they like came in and they like started just giving me shots and watching me for a while. It was real weird. And he's like, I bet you it was part of MK Ultra.
Does he recall anything of what he was doing after
I think there's things, there are some things that you can read online about like his, more in-depth description of the events. He said he spent days sleeping at a time. Wow. He kind of lost track of time after a while, like a lot of weird shit. Yeah. Also, Ted Kaczynski, the American domestic. Yeah, so he's also known as the Unabomber.
That's right.
Yes.
I'm like, why do I know that name?
Domestic terrorist.
Yes.
So he claims to have been subjected to psychological study and alleged by some sources to have been part of MK Ultra. Apparently, what he says is this happened while he was a sophomore at Harvard and that Kaczynski participated voluntarily in a study. And essentially, it was like a brutal psychological experiment. Essentially, he was required to spend like about 200 hours participating in this study, and it was all about like social isolation, sensory deprivation, sleep deprivation. So who knows what happened? And then I thought this one was interesting. There are also reports that Charles Manson has been tied to MK Ultra, beginning with his time in prison. Manson took part in a drug-induced psychological experiment, which apparently was run by the federal government. This is all alleged.
Tangent. I was just looking at Ted Kaczynski on Wikipedia.
Mm-hmm.
He ain't cute.
The man looks like an actual.
I mean.
Oh no, he looks like he stuck his finger in a socket.
He looks like a Unabomber.
If anyone
he looks like a Unabomber.
Has a face of a
creep,
it's Ted Kaczynski, you guys.
I had to look it up for a second. I'm like, holy hell.
He's a whole problem. So there's that interesting little tidbit too about Charles Manson. Apparently, he states that this experimentation, the psychological experiments, like continued through this, where he was receiving care at a free medical clinic in San Francisco once he was released from prison in 1967. So that was interesting.
Interesting.
I know. And again, this whole thing actually raised a lot of issues around informed consent in general, and it did lead to all of those laws and regulations being passed not only for experimental drugs, but for any drug treatment whatsoever. And to this day, the official position by the CIA is that they no longer participate in human experimentation or conduct any types of drug research to seek mind control. They insist that all MK Ultra type experiments have been completely abandoned.
Wow. So do we feel safe now?
Nope.
Yeah, I didn't think so.
I think there's a lot you guys know that we don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That doesn't make me feel good at all.
I think that some
shit didn't clear it up for me.
No, I think some shit goes down like literally every day and we have no fucking clue.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, that's the end of it.
Woo! Wow.
We did it. We wrapped that shit right up in a bow.
Yeah, no.
I know.
I feel like the bow wasn't even really tied just because...
No, it's kind of loose, shitty little bow.
It's shady. It's a shady bow.
It's a little bow.
Shady bow.
Shitty
I'm just
and
so
shady.
appalled that, like, you know, I understand, like, war strategy, and I understand, like, you know, that there's a lot that military and government and things do that a lot of people might find effed up, but just doing things to people, to unknowing and unwitting people, is just, like, beyond.
There's other ways we can do that.
I mean,
you know, we don't have to do that. There's other ways we can get information. There's other ways we can study things.
thanks.
We don't have
Your
to...
face is so puzzled right now.
I just like you. I'm just dumbfounded that this ever occurred.
I'm
like,
also really happy that after the release of our first episode, the government didn't shut us down.
Thank you, government. We know you're listening. We really appreciate your support.
We know you're listening.
We appreciate your support in allowing us to continue our tiny hobby.
If anyone, as well as the government, would like to follow us, you can find us at Instagram at MedCrimes Podcast.
The government can also tweet at us at MedCrimesPC if they so desire.
They and anyone could search for us on Facebook at MedCrimes Podcast.
If they wish to become a Patreon.
Now, wouldn't that be something?
You know, that actually I would be fine with. It would really show your support for the little guy and for the information being out there. I feel like that's a really good PR move. Go ahead,
to patreon.com/medcrimespodcast.
Do it.
Government.
Or email us your crazy stories, government. We know you got them. This is getting weird.
At medcrimes@gmail.com. Thanks for listening, everyone. Stay tuned and have a good March.
Stay safe out there.
See you in 2 weeks.